Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Chapter 1, Part 1. I spent the last afternoon of before constructing a 1/10,000 scale replica of the Empire State Building from boxes of adult diapers. It was a thing of beauty, really, spanning 5 feet at its base and towering above the cosmetics aisle, with jumbos for the foundation, lights for the observation deck, and meticulously stacked trial sizes for its iconic spire. It was almost perfect, minus one crucial detail. "You use Neverleak," Shelley said, eyeing my craftsmanship with a skeptical frown. "The sale's on Stay Tight." Shelley was the store manager, and her slumped shoulders and dour expression were as much a part of her uniform as the blue polo shirts we all had to wear. "I thought you said Neverleak," I said, because she had. "Stay Tight," she insisted, shaking her head regretfully, as if my tower were a crippled racehorse and she the bearer of the pearl-handled pistol. There was a brief but awkward silence in which she continued to shake her head and shift her eyes from me to the tower and back to me again. I stared blankly at her, as if completely failing to grasp what she was passive-aggressively implying. "Oh," I said finally, "you mean you want me to do it over?" "It's just that you used Neverleak," she repeated. "No problem, I'll get started right away." With the toe of my regulation black sneaker, I nudged a single box from the tower's foundation. In an instant, the whole magnificent structure was cascading down around us, sending a tidal wave of diapers crashing across the floor, boxes caroming off the legs of startled customers, skidding as far as the automatic door, which slid open, letting in a rush of August heat. Shelley's face turned the color of ripe pomegranate. She should have fired me on the spot, but I knew I'd never be so lucky. I'd been trying to get fired from Smart Aid all summer, and it had proved next to impossible. I came in late, repeatedly and with the flimsiest of excuses, made shockingly incorrect change, even mishandled things on purpose, stocking lotions amongst laxatives and birth control with baby shampoo. Rarely had I worked so hard at anything, and yet, no matter how incompetent I pretended to be, Shelley stubbornly kept me on the payroll. Let me qualify my previous statement. It was next to impossible for me to get fired from Smart Aid. Any other employee would have been out the door a dozen minor infractions ago. It was my first lesson in politics. There are 3 Smart Aids in Inglewood, the small, somnolent beach town where I lived. There are 27 in Sarasota County, and 115 in all of Florida, spreading across the state like some untreatable rash. The reason I couldn't be fired was that my uncles owned every single one of them. The reason I couldn't quit was that working at Smart Aid as your first job had long been a hallowed family tradition. All my campaign of self-sabotage had earned me was an unwinnable feud with Shelley and the deep and abiding resentment of my coworkers, who, let's face it, were going to resent me anyway, because no matter how many displays I knocked over or customers I shortchanged, one day I was going to inherit a sizable chunk of the company, and they were not. Wading through the diapers, Shelley poked her finger into my chest and was about to say something dour when the PA system interrupted her. "Jacob, you have a call on line 2. Jacob, line 2. She glared at me as I backed away, leaving her pomegranate face amid the ruins of my tower. The employee lounge was a dank, windowless room where I found the pharmacy assistant Linda nibbling a crustless sandwich in the vivid glow of the soda machine. She nodded at a phone screwed to the wall. "Line 2's for you. Whoever it is sounds freaked." I picked up the dangling receiver. "Jacob, is that you?" "Hi, Grandpa Portman." "Jacob, thank God. I need my key. Where's my key?" He sounded upset, out of breath. "What key?" "Don't play games," he snapped. "You know what key." "You probably just misplaced it." "Your father put you up to this," he said. "Just tell me. He doesn't have to know." "Nobody put me up to anything." I tried to change the subject. Did you take your pills this morning? They're coming for me, understand? I don't know how they found me after all these years, but they did. What am I supposed to fight them with? This goddamn butter knife? It wasn't the first time I'd heard him talk like this. My grandfather was getting old, and frankly, he was starting to lose it. The signs of his mental decline had been subtle at first, like forgetting to buy groceries or calling my mother by my aunt's name. But over the summer, his encroaching dementia had taken a cruel twist. The fantastic stories he'd invented about his life during the war, the monsters, the enchanted island, had become completely, oppressively real to him. He'd been especially agitated the last few weeks, and my parents, who feared he'd become a danger for himself, were seriously considering putting him in a home. For some reason, I was the only one who received these apocalyptic phone calls from him. As usual, I did my best to calm him down. You're safe. Everything's fine. I'll bring over a video for us to watch later. How's that sound? No! Stay where you are. It's not safe here. Grandpa, the monsters aren't coming for you. You killed them all in the war, remember? I turned to face the wall, trying to hide my end of this bizarre conversation from Linda, who shot me curious glances while pretending to read a fashion magazine. Not all of them, he said. No. I killed a lot, sure, but there are always more. I could hear him banging around the house, opening drawers and slamming things. He was in full meltdown. You stay away, hear me? I'll be fine. Cut out their tongues and stab them in the eyes. That's all you gotta do. If I could just find that goddamn key. The key in question opened a giant locker in Grandpa Portman's garage. Inside was a stockpile of guns and knives sufficient to arm a small militia. He spent half of his life collecting them, traveling to out-of-state gun shows, going on long hunting trips, and dragging his reluctant family to rifle ranges on sunny Sundays so they could learn to shoot. He loved his guns so much that sometimes he even slept with them. My dad had an old snapshot to prove it. Grandpa Portman napping with a pistol in hand. When I asked my dad why Grandpa was so crazy about guns, he said it sometimes happened to people who used to be soldiers who had experienced traumatic things. I guess that after everything my grandfather had been through, he never really felt safe anywhere, not even at home. The irony was, now that delusions and paranoia were starting to get the best of him, it was true. He wasn't safe at home. Not with all those guns around. That's why my dad had swiped the key. I repeated the lie that I didn't know where it was. There was more swearing and banging as Grandpa Portman stomped around looking for it. He said finally. Let your father have the key if it's so important to him. Let him have my dead body, too. I got off the phone as politely as I could, and then called my dad. Grandpa's flipping out, I told him. Has he taken his pills today? He won't tell me. Doesn't sound like it, though. I heard my dad sigh. Can you stop by and make sure he's okay? I can't get off work right now. My dad volunteered part-time at the bird rescue, where he helped rehabilitate snowy egrets hit by cars and pelicans that had swallowed fishhooks. He was an amateur ornithologist and a wannabe nature writer, with a stack of unpublished manuscripts to prove it, which are real jobs only if you happen to be married to a woman whose family owns 115 drugstores. Of course, mine was not the realest of jobs either, and it was easy to ditch whenever I felt like it. I said I would go. Thanks, Jake. I promise we'll get all this grandpa stuff sorted out soon, okay? All this grandpa stuff. You mean put him in a home, I said. Make him someone else's problem. Mom and I haven't decided yet. Of course you have. Jacob, I can handle him, Dad, really. Maybe now you can. But he's only going to get worse. Fine, whatever. I hung up and called my friend Ricky for a ride. 10 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable throaty honk of his ancient Crown Victoria in the parking lot. On my way out, I broke the bad news to Shelley. Her tower of stay-tight would have to wait until tomorrow. Family emergency, I explained. Right, she said. I emerged into the sticky hot evening to find Ricky smoking on the hood of his battered car. Something about his mud-encrusted boots and the way he let smoke curl from his lips and how the sinking sun lit his green hair reminded me of a punk redneck James Dean. He was all of those things, a bizarre cross-pollination of subcultures possible only in South Florida. He saw me and leapt off the hood. "You fired yet?" he shouted across the parking lot. "Shh," I hissed, running toward him. "They don't know my plan." Ricky punched my shoulder in a manner meant to be encouraging, but that nearly snapped my rotator cuff. "Don't worry, Special Ed. There's always tomorrow." He called me Special Ed because I was in a few gifted classes, which were, technically speaking, part of our school's special education curriculum, a subtlety of nomenclature that Ricky found endlessly amusing. That was our friendship, equal parts irritation and cooperation. The cooperation part was an unofficial brains for brawn trade agreement we'd worked out in which I helped him not to fail English, and he helped me not to get killed by the roided-out sociopaths who prowled the halls of our school. That he made my parents deeply uncomfortable was merely a bonus. He was, I suppose, my best friend, which is a less pathetic way of saying he was my only friend. Ricky kicked the Crown Vic's passenger door, which was how you opened it, and I climbed in. The Vic was amazing, a museum-worthy piece of unintentional folk art. Ricky bought it from the town dump with a jar of quarters, or so he claimed, a pedigree whose odor even the forest of air freshener trees he'd hung from the mirror couldn't mask. The seats were armored with duct tape so that air and upholstery springs wouldn't find their way up your ass. Best of all was the exterior, a rusted moonscape of holes and dents, the result of a plan to earn extra gas money by allowing drunken partygoers to whack the car with a golf club for $1 a swing. The only rule, which had not been rigorously enforced, was that you couldn't aim at anything made of glass. To be continued in Part 2.